She was homeless on Easter with nowhere to go when a lonely CEO opened his door and uncovered a truth that changed both their lives forever. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. A light drizzle fell over the city on that chilly April afternoon, dampening the sidewalks and turning the passing cars into streaks of gray and silver. For Celeste, however, the quiet rain felt like a grim reminder that Easter Sunday was only hours away, a holiday meant for celebration and family gatherings. Yet there she stood on the curb, a single mother with no place to call home, her 5-year-old son Matthew clinging to her hand. Every shop they passed displayed cheerful bunnies and brightly colored eggs in the windows, but those decorations only deepened the ache in Celeste's heart. She pulled the thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, thinking of how different her life had been just a few short years ago, before everything fell apart, before the man who'd once promised her the world had vanished, leaving her alone, jobless, and forced out of her tiny apartment. She might have found a friend or a relative to stay with if time hadn't whittled her list of loved ones down to no one. A wave of exhaustion washed over her. Another night on a battered cot at the crowded women's shelter, or maybe an even more desperate alternative. Easter used to mean hope, but now it felt like a reminder of all she'd lost. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Matthew whispered, tugging at her sleeve. His eyes were big and trusting, too young to understand why they had to keep walking in the rain. Celeste bent down to smooth his damp hair. "I know, sweetheart," she murmured, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'll find us something soon. Just keep holding my hand, all right?" They set off again, passing an old church with a bright sign announcing Easter services. She considered going inside. Churches sometimes offered free meals or a warm place to sit, but the memory of 3 years ago still burned in her mind. A single night that changed everything. At that very moment, in a towering glass building on the opposite side of the city, an affluent CEO named Adrian Blackwood sat behind his immaculate desk, oblivious to the light rain tapping at the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was reviewing end-of-quarter reports with robotic precision, determined to finish quickly so he could close his office early. Adrian avoided the holidays, especially Easter. They brought him nothing but reminders of loss he preferred to bury under paperwork and profit margins. His assistant, Linda, tentatively approached, placing a manila folder on the desk. "Sir, these are the final tallies you wanted, and I just wanted to confirm that you won't be attending the Easter event tomorrow." Adrian didn't bother to look up from his spreadsheet. "I already declined the invitation," he said curtly. "Send my regrets if necessary." Linda nodded, although the sadness in her eyes didn't escape his notice. Easter was meant to be a time of renewal and second chances, something Adrian had refused to acknowledge for years. When Linda left, he paused his work for a moment, gazing at a faint reflection of himself in the dark window. The man staring back at him looked tired and far older than his 33 years. There was a reason he hated Easter, a reason so painful he'd built high walls around himself to keep everything out, especially his own memories. Meanwhile, the drizzle turned into a steady rain as Celeste and Matthew continued down the empty street. Her feet felt sore, her stomach hollow, but she clung to Matthew's small hand as if it were a lifeline. The women's shelter was another mile away. Could she endure the long walk under the rain? She kept glancing at her son's damp sneakers, worried he'd catch a cold. Each time he looked up at her with those wide, trusting eyes, her heart clenched with guilt. He deserved better. Passing a row of shuttered shops, she spotted a deserted diner with lights still on inside. The neon sign flickered, "Open," in a half-hearted glow. Maybe, just maybe, she could spare enough coins for a bowl of soup. She turned the doorknob, and they stepped into the warmth of stale coffee and frying oil. A lone waitress, busy cleaning up for the night, looked at them with equal parts concern and caution. "Kitchen's about to close," she said, placing a dirty rag on the counter. Celeste swallowed her pride and approached. "I only have a few dollars," she said softly, hoping the waitress might take pity on them. "Could I get any soup you have left over? It's for my son." The woman seemed to take in the boy's soaked hair and Celeste's thin jacket. With a reluctant nod, she disappeared into the kitchen, then returned with a small styrofoam cup of vegetable broth. "That's all we've got, no charge," she murmured, handing it over. "Sit for a while if you need to. Just lock the door behind you when you go." "Thank you," Celeste whispered, relief momentarily warming her tired body. She guided Matthew to a booth in the corner, helping him sip the warm liquid. He finished it so quickly that she cringed, realizing how hungry he truly was. She gave him a wavering smile, wishing she could conjure a proper meal. She leaned back against the worn cushion of the booth, lulled by the dim lights. Watching Matthew's eyelids grow heavy, she recalled the moment she'd discovered she was pregnant. Panic and joy had wrestled in her heart back then, but the father, her fiancé at the time, had walked out of her life, leaving her with nothing but a hospital bill and a ring no longer on her finger. His last words, etched in her memory, still stung whenever she thought about them. Outside, the howling wind and the patter of raindrops reminded her that the shelter would fill up fast on a night like this. She shook Matthew gently when his eyes began to droop, guiding him back to the harsh reality. The waitress approached with a bag containing a few bread rolls. "Here," she said, her tone quiet. "I was going to throw them out anyway. Maybe it'll help." This small kindness brought tears to Celeste's eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. Just take care of yourself. And that boy," the waitress answered, flipping the sign from open to closed. "Safe travels." Celeste and Matthew made their way back onto the street, the bread rolls tucked in her jacket pocket. The bag was warm, and it gave her a sense of comfort. Brief, but needed. She almost didn't notice the headlights approaching until a black sedan skidded to a stop a few feet ahead. For a fleeting second, her heart pounded, thinking it might be trouble. But a man in a chauffeur's uniform lowered the window, his stern face creasing with concern. "You there," he said, voice gruff yet not unkind. "Are you all right? Do you need a ride?" She hesitated, torn between suspicion and desperation. People didn't usually stop at night for a disheveled mother and child. Matthew was trembling beside her, and the thought of walking another mile in the rain made her decision simpler. She nodded slowly, holding her son's hand tighter. If it was a mistake, she'd have to face it. But the weariness in her bones left her no choice. The man helped them into the back seat, and as Celeste's eyes adjusted, she realized how luxurious the interior was. The seats were leather, soft as if brand new. The driver looked in the rearview mirror. "It's not safe out here in this weather. Where should I drop you off?" She swallowed the lump in her throat. "The women's shelter on Pine Street, if that's okay." He nodded and pulled away from the curb. They rode in silence until the lights of the city became a blur. Celeste glanced at Matthew, who gazed out the window in silent wonder. She wondered what the driver must be thinking, picking up a bedraggled woman with a small child on a rainy night. The hush inside the car gave her space to reflect on how drastically life had changed in the last few years. She'd once dreamed of a bright future, only to watch it crumble so completely. When they arrived at the shelter, the driver studied the rundown building from behind the wheel. The faint glow of a flickering sign showed a crowded lobby. He took off his cap, running a hand through his short, silver hair. Then he passed Celeste a card through the open back window. "If things don't work out here, call this number. It's my employer's property management office. Perhaps they can arrange something. We do what we can occasionally." Celeste stared at the card, her heart thudding. The name on it was a corporate entity she recognized from local headlines, Blackwood Group. She'd heard rumors about the founder, a CEO who rarely appeared in public. People said he was wealthy beyond imagination, but also cold and withdrawn. "Thank you," she stammered, unsure how a single mother could ever approach a company of that magnitude. Yet some spark of hope fluttered inside her chest. Maybe there was a chance for a new beginning she hadn't dared to imagine. The sedan pulled away, leaving her and Matthew standing before the shelter's doors. She checked the card again. The swirling letters were elegant, exuding an air of importance. She slipped it into her jacket pocket alongside the bread, the only real possessions she had left. Inside the shelter, cramped bodies and worried faces greeted her. She found a corner space on the floor for Matthew to lie down on a thin mat. She tried to rest next to him, but her mind raced. She thought of the business card, the faint possibility that this reclusive corporate giant could offer even a shred of help. Then she recalled Easter Sunday, just hours away, and how the world outside would celebrate renewal while she hovered on the brink of despair. Drifting to a fitful sleep, she could almost see that magical night 3 years ago, when everything had been different, when she'd felt certain that love could conquer any obstacle. Her memories blurred, replaced by the quiet hum of the city night and Matthew's gentle breathing. Neither of them could guess that across town, behind a fortress of glass and steel, a lonely CEO was sipping black coffee, unaware that his life was about to intertwine with hers once again, this time in a way neither could have foreseen. The dull hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Celeste awoke in the women's shelter, her back stiff from sleeping on the thin mat. A chorus of quiet murmurs, babies fussing, and tired footsteps filled the cramped room where women and children sought refuge. She glanced at Matthew curled up beside her, his cheek pressed against the pillow, his small lips parted in sleep. Despite the hard floor and the unfamiliar surroundings, he looked peaceful, innocent, still shielding him from the harshness of their situation. Gently brushing her hand over his hair, she remembered the business card the driver had given her the night before. She'd tucked it into her jacket pocket next to the last of the bread rolls. In the stark morning light, reality seemed more daunting than ever. Would she dare contact the Blackwood Group? What could an ordinary woman, currently homeless, possibly say to a powerful corporation with offices in gleaming skyscrapers and a CEO rumored to be unapproachable? Slowly, others in the shelter stirred. A volunteer moved through the rows of mats, calling out names for the daily sign-in. She handed out plastic cups of weak coffee and small packs of crackers. Celeste's stomach cramped at the scent of coffee, reminding her that she'd eaten almost nothing but half a bread roll for dinner. She forced a tight smile as the volunteer offered her a cup, then saved it for when Matthew woke up, figuring the warmth might comfort him more than it would her. A wave of guilt washed over her. Easter Sunday was just hours away, and all she could think about was how to get through another day. She whispered a silent promise to Matthew that next Easter, somehow, would be better. At least she prayed it would be. "Mommy?" came Matthew's sleepy voice. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Where are we?" "We're in a safe place," she said gently, stroking his hair. "It's just for a little while. We'll figure out what to do next." A half smile flickered across his face, but she could see the question in his eyes. "Why aren't we at home?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out the second bread roll, handing it to him. "Breakfast," she said, trying to sound cheerful. He took it eagerly, then paused mid-bite. "You're not eating?" "I'm fine," she lied, patting her stomach. "I'll eat a bit later." Matthew held the roll out to her, childlike generosity shining on his face. It broke her heart and warmed it at the same time, but she insisted he finish it. Soon he was chewing hungrily while Celeste tried to ignore the twisting in her own belly. By mid-morning, the shelter was buzzing with activity. Some women were packing up to leave for jobs, others gathering children to catch the local bus to church. One of the staff members offered to watch Matthew in a supervised playroom for an hour, which gave Celeste a moment to step outside and think. She stood under the shelter's awning, staring at the folded business card. The name Blackwood Group was embossed in gold, followed by a private phone number. The driver's voice echoed in her head. "We do what we can occasionally." Why would a powerful CEO's organization be interested in helping random strangers off the street? Skepticism tugged at her, but her desperation was stronger. Taking a shaky breath, she stepped away from the main door and dialed the number on her battered phone, half expecting no one to answer. After 3 rings, a calm voice greeted her. "Blackwood Group, good morning?" Celeste's mouth went dry. "Hello, your driver gave me this card. He said maybe I could call for some assistance." She quickly added, "I have a son, we're in a shelter right now." A brief pause on the other end, then the voice softened. "Yes, I've been informed about your situation. May I have your name, please?" She provided it, feeling her heart pound. The assistant, or whoever it was, spoke professionally. "Thank you, Ms. Hart. I'll relay your information to Mr. Blackwood's office. We can't promise anything immediately, but if you can come by our building this afternoon, we can at least discuss possible housing arrangements or short-term relief. Is that feasible?" Celeste blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected them to respond so quickly. I'll find a way. Thank you so much." They set an appointment time, an hour that seemed impossibly soon, and with a polite goodbye, the call ended. Celeste stood there, clutching the phone, a swirl of hope and fear battling inside her. Could it really be this straightforward? Or was she walking into a situation where she'd be brushed aside, told it was all a misunderstanding? Returning inside, she found Matthew coloring with broken crayons on a shared table in the playroom. "Honey," she said quietly, "we're going on a little trip. There's someone who might be able to help us find a place to stay." He looked up, eyes brightening. "A new home?" "I don't know yet," she answered honestly, "but let's see." With that, they gathered what little belongings they had: a faded tote bag containing 2 changes of clothes, and an old photo of Celeste's late mother. She thanked the shelter staff for their kindness, promising to call if she needed the mat again that night. An older volunteer patted her shoulder. "I wish you both the best," she said softly. "And may Easter bring you a new beginning." Outside, the sky was still overcast, but the rain had stopped. Celeste and Matthew made their way to the nearest bus stop. She fished out coins, careful not to spend everything she had. Her resources were scant enough. The bus ride felt longer than usual, or perhaps her anxiety stretched each minute. The Blackwood Group's main building was in the heart of downtown, a sleek high-rise of steel and glass that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds. They stepped off the bus onto a bustling sidewalk. Executives in tailored suits hurried by, phones pressed to their ears. Tourists snapped photos of the skyscrapers. It all felt surreal to Celeste as she held Matthew's hand, weaving through the crowd until they reached the building's imposing entrance. A uniformed doorman glanced at her and the boy with professional courtesy, then opened the door. Inside, the lobby gleamed. Polished marble floors reflected chandeliers that looked like crystal waterfalls overhead. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in daylight, making everything sparkle. Celeste's steps faltered momentarily, intimidation creeping up her spine, but Matthew squeezed her hand and she forced her legs to move forward, approaching the reception desk. I have an appointment," she managed to say, giving her name to the well-groomed receptionist. The woman scrolled through a digital schedule, then nodded, not betraying an ounce of surprise at Celeste's disheveled appearance. "Ms. Hart, we've been expecting you. Please take the elevator to the top floor. Someone will meet you there." A faint wave of relief washed over Celeste, but it mingled with fresh nerves. She and Matthew walked across the grand lobby to the mirrored elevator doors. The ride up was smooth and silent, each floor number lighting up too quickly. When the elevator dinged at the top floor, the doors slid open to reveal a smaller but equally luxurious reception area. A man in a charcoal gray suit smiled politely from behind a sleek white desk. "Ms. Hart? Right this way, please. Mr. Blackwood's assistant will see you in the conference lounge." She followed him down a hushed hallway lined with abstract art. Matthew clung to her, craning his neck at the tall ceilings. Finally, they reached a glass-walled room overlooking the city skyline. The assistant, a poised woman named Linda, rose from her chair. Her gentle expression put Celeste somewhat at ease. "Welcome," Linda said quietly, gesturing to a small seating area. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice. May I get you anything? Water? Tea for your son?" Celeste nodded gratefully, and Linda disappeared momentarily, returning with water for Celeste and a small boxed juice for Matthew. Linda then took a seat, crossing her legs. A stack of folders rested on the glass table, but she didn't open them yet. "I understand you spoke to one of our drivers last night," Linda began. "He was concerned about your situation. It's not a service we typically advertise, but Mr. Blackwood does have a philanthropic initiative, especially around certain holidays, where he allocates funds to aid individuals or families in crisis. Temporary housing, job assistance, that sort of thing." Celeste felt her eyes sting with tears. It was more compassion than she ever expected. I don't want to impose, but my son and I are—" She didn't finish. Linda offered an understanding nod. "We'll do what we can. I have some forms that would help us determine what resources you might need. It's just preliminary," she added gently. "In many cases, Mr. Blackwood himself reviews these requests if they're urgent." A brief flicker of apprehension crossed Celeste's face at the mention of the elusive CEO. She recalled rumors that he was reclusive, a workaholic who rarely engaged in personal interactions unless absolutely necessary. Part of her was anxious at the thought of meeting him. Part was oddly curious. "Thank you," Celeste managed, brushing a stray hair from Matthew's forehead as he sipped his juice. "I'm so grateful. But to be honest, I'm also a little overwhelmed." Linda reached for a pen. "I understand. Why don't we start by learning a bit about your background, work experience, living situation, and we'll go from there." Celeste nodded, steeling herself. As Linda began asking questions, Celeste explained how she'd worked as a receptionist until her employer downsized, how she'd struggled as a single mother without support, and how she ended up in the shelter. She skipped over the more painful details, like the father who'd vanished when he learned she was pregnant. That betrayal still cut too deep. Throughout it all, Linda listened intently, taking notes. Something in her demeanor made Celeste feel safe enough to share. Even Matthew, typically shy around strangers, seemed to sense it was okay. He swung his little legs back and forth, occasionally peering at the magnificent view from the window. As the conversation wrapped up, Linda closed her folder. "All right, Ms. Hart. I'll bring this to Mr. Blackwood's attention as soon as possible. It is a holiday weekend, so it might take a day or two before finalizing any arrangements. In the meantime," she tapped her desk phone, "we can certainly put you in a temporary suite if you're comfortable, at least for tonight." Celeste nearly gasped. "A suite?" "It's simpler than it sounds. One of our charity partners maintains short-term residences for exactly this reason," Linda clarified. "It's warm and private, at least until your next steps are sorted." Tears of relief blurred Celeste's vision. All she'd wanted was a safer place for Matthew, and now a glimmer of real hope spread through her. "You have no idea how much this means," she said softly. Linda offered a comforting smile. "I do. Believe me, we see many stories like yours. And remember, you aren't alone. We'll do our best for you and your son." Celeste nodded, exhaling the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. For the first time in a long time, she dared to believe that maybe the future could hold something better. She ran her hand over Matthew's head. He looked up, sensing her shift in mood, and gave her a lopsided grin, something like the flicker of an Easter miracle. Neither of them knew that behind a closed door at the far end of the corridor, Adrian Blackwood stared at a photograph he kept hidden in his desk drawer. A snapshot from 3 years ago when he'd broken every rule he'd set for himself on a single, unforgettable night. Every holiday since, he'd buried himself in work, to forget. But now, an unexpected mother and son duo was about to change everything he thought he knew about second chances. The elevator doors slid open on the 12th floor of a boutique hotel affiliated with the Blackwood Group's philanthropic arm. Celeste stood just inside, clutching her tote bag in one hand and holding Matthew's small hand in the other. A friendly representative from the charity, a woman named Sasha, stepped out first and led them along a wide corridor. Soft lighting and plush carpeting made it feel more like a welcoming home than a hotel hallway. Celeste's heart thumped with cautious excitement. She still couldn't believe that less than 2 hours after meeting Linda, they were already being shown to a temporary suite where they could stay, free of charge, for at least a few days. She kept waiting for the catch, half expecting someone to stop them and say there'd been a mistake. But Sasha just walked confidently ahead, occasionally looking over her shoulder with a reassuring smile. When they reached the end of the hall, Sasha unlocked a door labeled 1208. "Here we are," she said gently. "Let's step inside." Celeste took a breath and followed. The suite was modest but lovely, a small living area with a sofa and television, a kitchenette stocked with basic supplies, and a separate bedroom with 2 twin beds. Everything was clean and bright, the air scented faintly with lavender from a discreet diffuser in the corner. It felt like a sanctuary compared to the shelter's cramped quarters. "This is yours for as long as necessary," Sasha explained, setting down a folder on the small dining table. "We'll check in with you every couple of days. There's a meal voucher system, so you won't have to worry about groceries right away. You can also call the front desk at any time if you need help." Celeste hadn't realized how tense she was until she felt her knees go weak with relief. I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," Sasha smiled warmly. "I'm just the coordinator. The real thanks goes to the organization Mr. Blackwood set up. They take pride in giving families a chance to get on their feet." Across the room, Matthew was already bouncing on one of the twin beds, a smile bright enough to light the entire suite. Seeing him so excited, Celeste felt a tender warmth bloom in her chest. With a murmured apology, she stepped aside and let her tears spill silently. For once, they were tears of gratitude, not desperation. While Matthew investigated the television remote, poking buttons and giggling, Celeste turned to Sasha. "How does all this actually work? I mean, beyond the immediate help. Will I have to repay everything someday, or meet with donors?" Sasha shook her head kindly. "We don't operate like a loan program. The idea is to bridge the gap until you can get stable housing and income. Of course, we'll encourage you to explore job opportunities or training programs once you're settled, but you don't owe us financially." She paused, then added more softly, "If you ever want to pay it forward down the line, that's up to you." Relief swelled again. She found it difficult to wrap her mind around such generosity, but she knew better than to question a miracle. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice trembling. Sasha nodded. "I'll leave you to settle in. Here's my card." She slid a plain business card across the dining table. "My number's there if you have any concerns. Tomorrow is Easter. Our group sometimes hosts a small gathering in the lobby for families. Nothing fancy, just crafts and a little egg hunt for the kids. You're welcome to join, or to rest if you prefer. No pressure." After Sasha left, Celeste collapsed onto the couch. Matthew bounded over and plopped down beside her, eyes shining. "Mommy, can we stay here forever?" he asked. She smiled at him, ruffling his hair. "Not forever, baby, but we can enjoy it for now." She reached to hug him close, inhaling the scent of his shampoo, still faint from the shelter's communal bathrooms. He giggled at the tight embrace, and Celeste realized just how long it had been since she felt any real sense of security. She mentally replayed the conversation with Linda. How the assistant had said that Mr. Blackwood sometimes took personal interest in urgent cases. Would he actually review her file? Would he even glance at it before approving some standard charity measure? She knew next to nothing about the man. For a split second, a memory of a different man, not wealthy, not gentle, flashed in her mind. The father of her child, the one who'd vanished 3 years ago. Her heart lurched painfully, as it always did when she thought of him. But she shook the memory aside, focusing on the present. Right now, she and Matthew were safe. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. She found a few small groceries in the kitchenette, snack bars, instant oatmeal, juice, enough to calm Matthew's rumbling stomach. They both changed out of their damp clothes, and Celeste even managed a brief nap while Matthew watched a cartoon. When evening fell, she looked out the window at the city lights, her thoughts drifting to what might happen next. She knew she couldn't rely on this arrangement forever, but for once, tomorrow didn't feel like a hopeless question mark. Meanwhile, in the Blackwood Group's penthouse office, Adrian Blackwood sat at his desk with a single lamp illuminating neat stacks of paperwork. The rest of the room was awash in shadows, the city skyline behind him an array of glittering windows. He had spent the day trying to distract himself with business expansions and international calls, but his focus kept slipping. Easter was tomorrow, and that nagging emptiness he felt around every holiday had begun to claw at him. He tapped a pen against a thick file he hadn't opened yet. Linda had left it there with a sticky note. Urgent, family request, Ms. Hart. He would typically sign off on philanthropic requests without much detail, trusting the team's judgment. But the note said urgent, and Linda rarely used that label unless it was truly a pressing situation. Exhaling softly, Adrian slid the pen aside and opened the file. Inside, he found a summary of Celeste Hart's circumstances: job loss, eviction, a child named Matthew, reliant on the local shelter. He felt a pang. Linda had attached a photograph, likely taken at the shelter for identification. Celeste and her son stood under harsh fluorescent lighting, their eyes tired yet hopeful. Adrian's gaze locked on the woman's face. Something about her expression stirred a sense of déjà vu he couldn't place. He flipped through more pages, noting Linda's bullet points. Mother and child placed in hotel suite. Current plan. Short-term relief. Potential for job training. Then came a list of Celeste's past employment roles, her references, and her mention of a fiancé who'd disappeared. Adrian paused over that last line, feeling a strange ache in his chest. He closed the folder, rubbing his temples. He hated how emotional these cases made him feel, especially around this time of year. He rose from his desk, stepping over to the wide window that overlooked the city. His reflection merged with the glittering skyline, reminding him how lonely he felt in this glass fortress. For years, he'd kept the world at arm's length, refusing to let anyone break through that barrier. Yet a single line about a child growing up fatherless made a lump form in his throat. Adrian recalled that night, 3 Easters ago, when he'd impulsively driven out of the city on a whim. The memory was hazy, but he remembered meeting someone at a small roadside inn. A fleeting connection, fleeting warmth, followed by regrets he never fully processed. Why was it echoing in his mind right now? He gritted his teeth, trying to push it away. Turning back to his desk, he picked up the file again. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to read more, but he flipped to the final page. Linda had scrawled a note. They have absolutely no one else. The boy is 5. The mother is resourceful, but she's at her limit. She's not asking for anything beyond a roof for her child. With a slow exhale, he found himself scribbling an authorization for extended aid. A private thought nudged at him to do more than the standard process, offer her a direct job or personal financial support, but he shut the folder quickly, as though it burned his fingertips. He couldn't get personally involved. That was always the rule. "Linda," he called through the intercom. A moment later, her calm voice responded, "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Send Ms. Hart's file to our HR liaison for possible job placement, or at least see if we can line something up for her to interview, and ensure the boy has everything he needs in that suite." A pause. "Understood, sir." Anything else? He hesitated. No, that's fine. Thank you. Adrian ended the call feeling his heart pound. Helping from a distance, that was how he'd always done it. He would not cross that line, especially not around Easter, not when the old ghosts threatened to resurface. Still, that photograph of Celeste remained etched in his mind. The quiet dignity behind her exhausted eyes made him wonder how far she'd go to protect her son. He recognized that same fierce love in her face that he'd once seen in someone else, someone who was long gone. He sank back into his chair, scowling at the city lights. He'd meet with Linda again tomorrow, but for now, he wanted to close his eyes and forget. Easter or not, he intended to bury himself in profit margins and strategic plans, hoping that would keep the memories at bay. But deep down, a tiny voice in his mind whispered that fate had already set a different plan in motion, and it might involve crossing paths with Ms. Hart sooner than he ever anticipated. In the quiet comfort of the suite, Celeste tucked Matthew into one of the twin beds, pulling the covers snug around his shoulders. Outside the window, a cool night breeze rustled the curtains, and she could see the faint glow of city lights. For a moment she pictured what tomorrow might bring, maybe an Easter with real laughter instead of the usual dread. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing his hair back as he drifted off. It struck her how miraculous it felt just to have this moment, to watch him fall asleep somewhere safe. She whispered a silent thank you to whatever force of the universe had led her to that driver last night. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. Exhaustion soon pulled her toward the other bed. As she closed her eyes, she couldn't help recalling her first Easter with Matthew, when she still clung to hope that his father might return. Now, 3 years later, she wasn't holding out for that at all. She just wanted to give Matthew a stable home, no matter what she had to do or how many hours she'd have to work. Unbeknownst to her, miles across the city, Adrian Blackwood tried to sleep in his dark penthouse, haunted by his own Easter memories. Both of them separated by status, secrets, and heartbreak, yet strangely connected by a single chance encounter that neither of them fully remembered, at least not yet. Because on Easter Sunday, fate might bring them face to face with a truth long buried, and once uncovered, it would change both their lives forever. Early Easter morning, Celeste awoke to soft rays of sunlight streaming through the hotel suite's curtains. For a moment she forgot where she was. Her mind still clung to the stress of the shelter and that familiar uncertainty. But then her eyes landed on the neat little kitchenette and the comfortable armchair by the window, and she remembered with a surge of gratitude that they had a warm place to call their own, at least for now. She threw off the blankets, noticing Matthew still asleep in the twin bed across from her. His small face was relaxed, mouth slightly open, his lashes a dark flutter against his cheeks. In moments like this, he looked so much younger than 5, so fragile that she felt both protective and hopeful at the same time. Being careful not to wake him, she tiptoed into the kitchenette. The clock on the microwave read 7:02 a.m. She rummaged quietly, finding enough provisions for a simple breakfast, packets of instant oatmeal, small cartons of milk, and a banana or two. A wave of relief filled her. Knowing they had enough to eat first thing in the morning was a luxury she'd stopped taking for granted. She set a small pot on the single electric burner to heat water. After a few minutes, the aroma of oatmeal drifted through the suite, stirring Matthew from sleep. He sat up, blinking in confusion before remembering where he was. "Mommy!" he called, then slid out of bed and hurried over. His grin showcased a mix of baby and adult teeth that always made her heart flutter. "Morning, sleepyhead," Celeste teased, handing him a mug of warm oatmeal. She'd cooled it by stirring in milk. He perched on a chair at the small dining table, slurping happily. She watched him with fond amusement, noticing how the shadows under his eyes had lessened. Even a single night of proper rest seemed to make a difference. When they finished breakfast, Celeste glanced at the clock again. She recalled that Sasha had mentioned an Easter gathering in the lobby, an egg hunt or something similar for the children. Part of her hesitated, uncertain whether it was truly meant for them or for other hotel guests. But then she pictured Matthew rummaging around for plastic eggs, smiling carefree like a normal kid, and the thought was too tempting to pass up. "Matthew," she said, "would you like to check out the lobby today? They might have a special Easter activity for kids." He practically leapt off his chair, eyes wide. "Egg hunt? That's what I heard. Let's get dressed first." In the bedroom, Celeste combed her hair, wishing she had a nicer outfit. Her clothes were mostly worn and mismatched, given the chaos of recent weeks. She settled on a clean pair of jeans and a soft sweater, then helped Matthew change into his tidiest shirt. A part of her remembered past Easters, her mother's tradition of dressing up in new clothes for church, then enjoying a grand meal at home. This year felt different, but maybe it could still hold some magic. They headed downstairs to the lobby, stepping out of the elevator onto a scene that could have been plucked from an Easter postcard. The staff had decorated with pastel balloons and colorful banners. A small corner near the reception desk featured a makeshift garden of potted plants and artificial turf where plastic eggs peeked out from behind toy bunnies and foam chicks. A handful of other children, mostly from nearby rooms or staff families, scampered around, baskets clutched in their arms. At first, Celeste hung back, feeling shy, but a young woman wearing rabbit ears approached with a friendly wave. "Hi, are you here for the egg hunt? We have extra baskets if you'd like." Matthew gripped Celeste's hand, looking up at her for permission. She nodded, smiling. "Yes, please," she murmured. "We'd love to join." A staff member handed Matthew a bright green basket, which he clutched eagerly. The woman explained the simple rules. Some eggs had candy, others had small toys, and a few contained slips of paper redeemable for a special treat at the cafe. "Have fun," she said, stepping aside so the new arrivals could join in. Celeste watched with a warmth in her heart as Matthew dashed off with the other kids, squealing each time he spotted an egg tucked under a chair or behind a potted plant. She stayed close, but not too close, letting him claim a piece of normal childhood. On the other side of the lobby, she noticed a few families in casual clothes, sipping coffee and chatting as their children romped around. She wondered if they too were recipients of the same philanthropic program or simply hotel guests on vacation. Either way, there was a sense of belonging in the air. Nobody seemed to judge her or question why she was there. Amid the laughter and rustle of candy wrappers, Celeste caught sight of Sasha standing near the reception desk, speaking quietly with another staff member. When Sasha noticed Celeste, she waved her over. "How are you settling in?" she asked, voice warm with genuine concern. "It's wonderful," Celeste replied, meaning it wholeheartedly. "Matthew's having a blast. Thank you for letting us join in the festivities." Sasha smiled. "That's what today is about, fresh starts and little joys." She glanced at Matthew, who was proudly showing another child his haul of colorful eggs. "After the hunt, we have a small brunch in the cafe for participants. You're welcome to come along. It's casual. Pancakes, fruit, that sort of thing." Celeste's stomach fluttered. "A proper meal?" "Thank you. That would be lovely," she said softly. She hadn't realized how symbolic this day might become, a day of hope after so much hardship. Just then, a hush swept through the lobby. People's eyes shifted toward the tall glass doors at the entrance, as if drawn by a gravitational pull. Celeste followed their line of sight and saw a tall figure stepping inside, flanked by a subdued older man who wore a chauffeur's uniform. The new arrival cut an imposing silhouette, impeccably tailored suit, dark hair neatly combed, posture that spoke of money and authority. He carried himself with a sort of aloof detachment, even as staff members nodded in greeting. It was Adrian Blackwood, the man behind the entire corporate empire, the rumored recluse, the unseen force behind Celeste's unexpected salvation. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never laid eyes on him before, but something about him felt strangely familiar. She wondered if it was simply the familiarity of his name and reputation. He paused near the reception desk, scanning the colorful chaos of the egg hunt with a carefully neutral expression. The staff seemed surprised to see him, some greeting him politely, others moving aside to give him space. It was unusual, Celeste guessed, for the CEO himself to show up on a holiday. Sasha cleared her throat, stepping forward. "Mr. Blackwood," she said politely, "I didn't realize you'd be joining us today. Happy Easter." She tried to keep her tone bright, but there was a hint of tension. No one wanted to do or say the wrong thing around the boss. Adrian nodded a greeting, his gaze flicking across the children before settling on Sasha. "I had some business in the area," he replied with a crisp edge to his voice. Then, more softly, he added, "I thought I'd check on the hotel's holiday event." His eyes caught Celeste's for a fraction of a second, and she felt an odd jolt like static electricity dancing across her skin. He looked away almost immediately, continuing his conversation with Sasha. But that brief moment left her heart pounding. She couldn't place why, but something about his presence felt heavy, as though the air had shifted with unspoken tension. She tried to compose herself, turning her attention back to Matthew. He was triumphantly holding up an egg with a slip of paper inside, which likely meant a special treat. She rushed over to congratulate him, ignoring the sense that someone else was watching. The reality was probably simpler. Adrian Blackwood was simply overseeing his philanthropic event, not specifically noticing her. She was just another beneficiary among many. But the longer she lingered near the children, the more she felt Adrian's presence in the corner of her vision. He wandered around the lobby, politely acknowledging staff, occasionally bending down to speak briefly to a child who ran up to show him a candy-filled egg. Each time, Celeste observed his careful distance, as though he wasn't quite sure how to interact with an atmosphere so full of laughter and warmth. She noted the slight hesitation in his posture, the fleeting vulnerability in his eyes. It was as if he wore an invisible shield. At one point, she caught Sasha pointing discreetly in Celeste's direction, and Adrian gave a minuscule nod. Her stomach twisted. Was she about to be called over for a polite introduction? She didn't know whether to feel grateful or frightened. A swirl of questions rose. How was she supposed to greet this man who'd saved her from homelessness without even knowing her? Before she could decide, Matthew bounced up, tugging at her sleeve. "Mommy, look!" He brandished a small plastic bunny figurine. "I found it in a purple egg!" She knelt to admire his prize. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Do you like it?" "Uh-huh," he grinned. "Can we keep it forever?" She ruffled his hair. "Absolutely." Distracted by Matthew's excitement, she missed the moment Adrian slowly approached from behind, hands in his pockets. When she looked up, there he was, less than 5 feet away. It startled her, and she quickly stood, her cheeks flushing. He seemed equally uncertain, as if he wasn't used to casual introductions in a hotel lobby bustling with children and candy wrappers. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, unsure of the proper etiquette. Did she curtsy, shake his hand, thank him on her knees for the roof over her head? But Adrian simply gave a polite tilt of his head. Up close, his eyes were a deep gray blue, and though they carried an air of guardedness, Celeste thought she saw a flicker of recognition. He opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated. Matthew, unaware of adult nerves, stepped right in front of Adrian and held up his new bunny figurine. "Look!" Matthew exclaimed, undaunted by the man's imposing presence. "It's my bunny! I found it!" Adrian blinked, seemingly caught off guard by the child's straightforward excitement. Slowly, his lips curved into what might have been the hint of a smile. "That's great," he said quietly, his voice less icy than before. He crouched slightly to meet Matthew's eye level. "You have a good collection of eggs in your basket." Matthew nodded with zeal, rattling the eggs. Celeste stood there, her heart hammering, not sure what to do next. She could feel the tension in the air, both from her own anxiety and from something unspoken in Adrian's demeanor. "It's nice to finally meet you, Ms. Hart," Adrian said, straightening up again. "Linda informed me you'd be staying in one of our suites." His tone was businesslike yet not harsh. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling just a bit. "Thank you so much. You've given us a chance to get back on our feet." She paused, swallowing the lump of emotion. "I can't thank you enough." He nodded, his gaze flicking between her face and Matthew's. "I'm glad you and your son are settling in." The words were formal, but there was a subtle softness in his eyes, something almost haunted. She wondered if he always looked like this or if the holiday stirred something deeper inside him. Before she could speak again, a staff member called Adrian over to greet a visiting sponsor. He inclined his head to Celeste one last time and strode away, leaving her exhaling the breath she'd been holding. The entire exchange lasted barely a minute, yet she felt drained by the intensity. Matthew tugged her sleeve again, oblivious. "Mommy, can we go see if they have pancakes now?" She smiled down at him, her heart still racing. "Yes, let's go do that." As they walked toward the cafe area with other families, Celeste threw one more glance over her shoulder. Adrian stood by the main entrance conversing with a sponsor, but she saw his eyes drift in her direction. Their gazes locked for a split second, long enough that she felt a jolt of something akin to familiarity. Then he turned away again, maintaining that carefully composed exterior. Inside Celeste's mind, questions swirled. Why did he seem so distant yet oddly affected? Could it be the normal awkwardness of a CEO who rarely mingled in such casual settings? Or was there another reason behind the fleeting recognition in his eyes? She couldn't be sure. All she knew was that her heart was pounding, and the encounter felt like it held more weight than a typical employer-client greeting. With Matthew chattering happily about pancakes, Celeste told herself not to dwell on it. She had enough to worry about, making sure she and her son rebuilt their lives. Still, she couldn't shake the lingering sense that something unspoken had just passed between them, something that might cast a long shadow over both their futures, for better or for worse. Late that afternoon, Celeste returned to the hotel suite with Matthew, both of them still buoyed by the festive energy downstairs. Her son clutched his basket of plastic eggs and candy treasures like a prized trophy, recounting every moment of the hunt in animated detail. She smiled at his enthusiasm, grateful he'd enjoyed even a small taste of normal holiday fun, but the brief meeting with Adrian Blackwood lingered in her mind. She couldn't pinpoint why. It had been so fleeting. Yet the memory of his guarded gray-blue eyes, the almost hesitant way he'd bent down to talk to Matthew, and the faint crack in his otherwise impassive demeanor all stayed with her. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself that he was just a wealthy philanthropist, and she was just a mother in need. No matter how unorthodox it felt, that was the simple truth. The suite had been tidied by housekeeping during their time in the lobby. A fresh fruit basket awaited on the table, courtesy of the hotel. Matthew set his Easter haul on the counter, rummaging for the final piece of candy, a pink-wrapped chocolate egg. Celeste, longing for a moment's quiet, sank onto the couch, stretching her tired legs. Out the window, the city lights began to glow as dusk approached. She glanced at Matthew, who was too enthralled with his bounty to notice anything else. "I'm going to make a quick call, honey," she told him. He nodded, unwrapping his candy with single-minded focus. She picked up the hotel phone. The thought of calling anyone from her past felt nerve-wracking, but she'd promised the shelter staff she would check in. Plus, there was a friend from her old job, Tanya, who had called several times, concerned about her disappearance. Maybe it was time to let someone know she was safe. She dialed Tanya's number from memory. It rang just once before Tanya's energetic voice answered. "Hello?" "Hey, Tanya," Celeste said quietly, her heart tightening. "It's me, Celeste." A pause, then an exhalation of relief. "Girl, Where have you been? I've been so worried." Celeste closed her eyes, guilt flooding her. "I'm sorry I disappeared. Everything fell apart so fast. I lost the apartment, ended up at the shelter. I didn't want to burden anyone." "Celeste, you could never burden me," Tanya chastised gently. "I was your cube mate for 2 years. We practically survived that last round of layoffs together. You should have told me." Emotions burned behind Celeste's eyes. "I know, it's just pride, fear, you name it." Tanya sighed. "Are you at least okay now?" Celeste nodded, even though Tanya couldn't see her. "Yes, I'm in a temporary place. Actually, I got lucky. A big charity run by the Blackwood Group set me and my son up for a while." "That's good news," Tanya said, her tone brightening. "And the job front?" "Not yet," Celeste admitted. "They mentioned some training or placement options, so I'm hoping to hear more next week. I still have your old references, so maybe I'll line up interviews soon." Tanya's supportive warmth came through the line. "Anything you need, I'm here. And I mean it. You have my number, right?" Celeste's eyes teared up again. She swallowed and answered, "I do. And thank you." They spent a few more minutes catching up, mostly Celeste listening to office gossip about who got promoted, who left. Tanya insisted that once Celeste was more settled, they should get together in person. When Celeste finally hung up, she felt lighter. She had at least one friend still rooting for her. The world might not be entirely against her, after all. She turned back to Matthew, who had managed to open several more pieces of candy and was busily arranging them on the coffee table in a colorful row. "Look, Mom," he said proudly, "I'm sorting them by color." She laughed softly, coming over to admire his system. "That's great, kiddo. Just remember, no more candy until dinner." He nodded, though he seemed more interested in the chocolate than any real meal. A knock at the door startled them. Celeste rose, instinctively protective. When she peered through the peephole, she recognized the woman outside as Linda, the same assistant from the Blackwood Group who'd initially interviewed her. Celeste opened the door, managing a polite smile. "Linda, hi." "Hello," Linda greeted, stepping inside with a gentle smile. She carried a slim folder and glanced affectionately at Matthew. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to drop by and discuss a few updates." Celeste invited her to sit at the small dining table. Linda opened the folder, revealing a few typed documents and a brochure. "First, I want you to know Mr. Blackwood personally approved an extended stay here until you can secure permanent housing. That's indefinite for now, but typically we aim for a 3 to 6 month transition." 3 to 6 months? Celeste's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that generous a time frame. "Wow," Linda nodded. "We believe in stability before job placement, so you're not rushed out after just a few weeks. And speaking of job placement," she slid the brochure over. "This is from our HR department. They have a list of partner companies and training programs. We can set up interviews next week if you feel ready." Celeste skimmed the brochure, her heart fluttering at the possibilities. Customer service, administrative work, even a chance at a small business grant someday. "I'm definitely interested," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "The sooner I can earn money, the better." Linda's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "Excellent. I'll book you in for a preliminary meeting on Monday. Our career counselor, April, can go over your resume and see where you might fit." She jotted a note. "Also, if you prefer, child care assistance can be arranged for Matthew during your interviews." Celeste felt close to tears again. "Thank you. I can't believe how thorough this is. You're all doing so much for us." "It's what the program was designed for," Linda reassured, then gently added, "Mr. Blackwood has always been adamant about not just handing out funds, but providing a pathway for people to rebuild." The mention of Adrian Blackwood sparked that memory from the lobby again. His gray-blue stare, the flicker of recognition she couldn't explain. She wondered if Linda knew him on a more personal level or if she, too, kept that professional distance. He seems Very dedicated, Celeste ventured carefully. A hint of warmth touched Linda's smile. He is, in his own way. Most people don't see it, because he's usually buried in work and avoids public events. But he cares. She cleared her throat, clearly not wanting to dwell too long on the CEO's personal traits. Anyway, that's all for now. I'll let you get back to your evening with Matthew. Celeste offered to walk Linda to the door. On the way, Linda paused, eyes flicking to the candy spread on the coffee table. She flashed a teasing grin at Matthew. Got enough sugar there, young man? Matthew giggled. I'm saving it for later. Linda waved goodbye, leaving Celeste with a fresh stack of documents and a renewed sense of hope. After the door clicked shut, mother and son collapsed on the couch, letting the relief settle in. At that same hour, Adrian Blackwood stood on the rooftop terrace of his corporate headquarters, gazing at the setting sun. The vast city stretched before him, a tapestry of lights flickering on as dusk approached. With the Easter celebrations winding down, he'd found himself alone, the emptiness of the moment pressing on his chest. He'd slipped out of the hotel after exchanging only a few polite words with the sponsors, unsettled by the surge of emotions he couldn't quite identify. The image of Celeste and her son, Matthew, lingered like an echo in his mind. There was something about the boy's wide-eyed innocence, something that tugged at Adrian's heart in ways he wasn't prepared to handle. Over the years, Adrian had perfected the art of compartmentalizing his life. Business in one sealed box, personal matters in another. But tonight, those boxes threatened to spill their contents. An old memory nudged at him, one he'd tried to bury. A single night, 3 years ago, when he'd broken his own rules and found himself entangled with a stranger at a small inn. He'd never even seen her face clearly afterward, nor learned her name. He'd left in the early morning with only a note of apology, yet the bittersweet recollection haunted him every Easter, and somehow, seeing Celeste felt like tapping into that same painful place. Could she remind him of that stranger? Or was it mere coincidence that his mind was drawing parallels? His jaw tightened as he wrestled with the idea that fate might be playing a twisted trick on him. I'm overthinking, he told the wind, his voice lost to the rooftop's quiet. Drawing a deep breath, he tried to refocus. There was no point dwelling on a long-past mistake. He had authorized aid for Celeste Hart. His philanthropic duty was fulfilled. She would rebuild her life, and he would remain behind the scenes. That's how it was supposed to be. Yet somewhere beneath his cool resolve, a nagging voice asked, what if the past wasn't so distant? What if some piece of that Easter night lived on in ways he'd never accounted for? He shook his head, dispelling the thought. Gripping the terrace railing, he stared harder at the sprawling cityscape. If there was anything he'd learned from his lonely ascension to billionaire CEO, it was that regrets needed to stay locked away. Let others celebrate new beginnings. For Adrian Blackwood, Easter was just another day to keep moving forward, alone and always in control. Back in the suite, night set in. Celeste tucked Matthew into bed after a modest dinner, turning off the overhead lights so the lamplight bathed the room in a soft glow. She settled on the couch, reading over the documents Linda had left, pages detailing possible administrative positions, childcare resources, even a monthly stipend if she enrolled in certain job training courses. It was more opportunity than she'd ever expected. Her gaze drifted to the window, where distant skyscrapers twinkled against the night sky. Among them, she knew, was the building that housed Adrian Blackwood's office. She wondered if he was there, working late as rumored. Perhaps he'd already forgotten their brief interaction in the lobby, just a small moment in his busy day. Yet for her, it felt strangely significant. A flicker of anxiety tugged at her. She recalled that instant when they locked eyes. She couldn't name the emotion in his gaze. Was it surprise, curiosity, regret? Part of her wanted to dismiss it as her own imagination, but another part whispered that there might be a puzzle piece missing. She pressed a hand over her racing heart, shutting her eyes. "You're just grateful," she told herself in the hush of the suite. Don't read more into it than that. Yet a quiet corner of her mind held the uneasy sense that destiny was nudging them onto the same path for reasons neither of them fully understood. And if that path revealed a long-hidden secret, one tied to a night Celeste had tried hard to forget, then everything about this new beginning might come crashing down before it could truly start. Monday morning brought a sense of renewed energy to the suite. Celeste woke early, the sunlight painting the room in soft gold. For a moment she lay in bed and listened to Matthew's gentle breathing from the other side of the room. A flutter of optimism warmed her. She had a plan today, a clear next step. She quietly slipped into the kitchenette to prepare breakfast. Instant oatmeal again, though this time she added a little honey from the mini fridge stash. Matthew stirred at the smell, sitting up and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He swung his legs over the bed and wandered over, sniffing appreciatively. "What's that, Mommy?" he asked, peering into the bowl. "Oatmeal with a secret ingredient," she teased, drizzling the honey. "Taste it." He took a spoonful and grinned. "It's sweeter now." She smiled back, heart lifting at how even these small pleasures meant so much after the hardships they'd endured. "Yep, can't have you going hungry, especially on a big day," she said, remembering the meeting Linda had scheduled with the career counselor at 10 a.m. While Matthew ate, Celeste selected her outfit carefully. She only had a few pieces of professional clothing that had survived her eviction, but she'd pressed them the night before. A simple blouse and a knee-length black skirt would have to do. She brushed her hair into a neat ponytail, then helped Matthew change into jeans and a clean t-shirt. By 9:30 she was ready, a bundle of nerves and cautious hope. She'd arranged for hotel childcare, a courtesy offered by the philanthropic program so Matthew could stay safely occupied while she spoke with the counselor. Holding his hand, she took the elevator down to the second-floor childcare room. It was brightly decorated, with toys scattered across colorful rugs. The attendant was a warm-faced woman who greeted Matthew cheerfully, ushering him toward a small play kitchen that immediately caught his eye. "You'll be okay here, baby?" Celeste asked, crouching beside him. He nodded, already captivated by plastic pots and pans. "Yes, Mommy." She brushed a kiss over his forehead, a familiar twist of anxiety tugging at her heart. But she reminded herself he was safe now. This wasn't some anonymous overcrowded shelter. This was a reputable program meant to help families like theirs. It was time for her to take a step forward. The HR liaison's office was on the 17th floor. When Celeste arrived, she found a quiet waiting area with plush chairs and a glass window overlooking the city. A young receptionist wearing a headset offered her a seat and some water. Celeste sipped nervously, scanning the posters on the walls that advertised various job training opportunities. At exactly 10 a.m., a slender woman with short curly hair emerged from a side door, beaming. "Ms. Hart, I'm April, the career counselor. Please come in." Celeste stood, heart fluttering. She followed April into a modern office filled with motivational quotes and a large whiteboard listing job leads. April gestured to a comfortable chair and took a seat behind a rounded desk. "I've looked over the notes from Linda and your previous employment info," April began, tapping a tablet. "You have experience in reception, some office administration, plus you mentioned you used to do light bookkeeping tasks." Celeste nodded. "At my last job, I sometimes helped with invoices and scheduling. Nothing too advanced, though." "That's still very useful," April said, smiling. "We have a few partner companies currently looking for entry to mid-level admin staff. One does event planning, another is in property management. How do you feel about interviewing?" Celeste swallowed. She was both excited and terrified. "I'd be grateful for any opportunity," she admitted. "I just haven't interviewed in a while." April's tone was reassuring. "No problem. We can do a practice run if you'd like. Also, I'll help tweak your resume. Sometimes reformatting it to highlight your strongest skills can make a difference." They spent the next hour discussing Celeste's work history, her strengths, and what sort of environment she might thrive in. April offered pointers on how to handle interview questions, especially the gaps in her employment due to her struggles as a single mother. Celeste took diligent notes, feeling a mix of relief and eagerness. It felt good to be proactive again rather than stuck in survival mode. "Let's aim for 2 interviews this week," April said, scanning her screen. "I see that the property management firm has an opening for a front desk coordinator, someone who can greet clients, handle phone calls, manage scheduling. You'd essentially be the face of the office. It's a full-time position with benefits." Celeste tried not to look too hopeful, but she couldn't help the spark in her eyes. "That sounds perfect. I'm used to reception work and I enjoy interacting with people." "Wonderful," April responded, tapping notes into her tablet. "I'll set that up. There's also a second role at a non-profit event organizer. They need admin support for fundraising galas and community outreach. Might be more fast-paced, but it's also quite fulfilling. If that appeals to you, I can arrange an interview as well." "That would be amazing," Celeste breathed. She'd never imagined having 2 solid leads so quickly. "Thank you, April," the counselor beamed. "That's what I'm here for. Let's keep in touch daily. And remember, you have childcare support while you interview. The next step is in your hands, but we'll guide you every step of the way." As Celeste left the office, she felt buoyant. She retrieved Matthew from the childcare room where he'd drawn pictures of a bright yellow house with himself and Celeste smiling out front. It nearly brought her to tears. Perhaps, she thought, they were close to building a real home, one that wasn't just a dream on paper. That afternoon, Adrian Blackwood prowled the corridors of the corporate tower, his mind torn in several directions. He'd spent the morning dealing with an international client crisis, an entire product shipment stuck in customs, yet even as he resolved it, his thoughts drifted. Linda had mentioned Celeste's upcoming job placement meeting. Adrian told himself it was just routine knowledge, part of the philanthropic updates he received. Still, he found himself wondering how her meeting was going, if she was nervous, if the little boy would be all right in the daycare. "Focus," he muttered under his breath, stepping into the executive conference room. He had a meeting with board members to finalize quarterly strategies. Surrounded by suits and ties, he forced his attention on the presentation slides. Profit margins, expansions, acquisitions. Normally, he thrived on this data. But today, it felt like background noise. Halfway through the meeting, Linda entered discreetly, passing him a note. He glanced down. "Property management front desk coordinator interview for Ms. Hart set for Wednesday. Also, event planning interview Friday. FYI, no immediate action needed from you, just updating." He nodded almost imperceptibly, folding the note. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a board member raise an eyebrow, probably wondering what was so important. Adrian plastered on his usual neutral mask and turned back to the discussion about the upcoming financial report, but a small part of him felt relief that Celeste was making progress. As the meeting wore on, he tried not to think about why he cared so much. When it finally ended, he lingered in the empty conference room, gazing at the city through the windows. The swirl of emotions he'd managed to suppress threatened to surface again. He recalled how Celeste had looked in the lobby, guarded, grateful, and vulnerable. And that child, Matthew. The memory of the boy's bright eyes stirred a pang he couldn't fully name. With a frustrated sigh, Adrian headed back to his office, determined to drown himself in more data. He needed to maintain professional distance. That was the rule, always. Day by day, the plan unfolded smoothly for Celeste. She spent Tuesday refining her resume with April's help and practicing interview answers. Matthew remained thrilled by the childcare room, making new friends with other kids in similar circumstances. Each night, Celeste would tuck him in and then sit on the couch, reviewing her notes, her heart hammering with both excitement and fear. Come Wednesday, she dressed in her best attire again, still the same blouse and skirt, carefully laundered. The hotel arranged a driver to take her across town to the property management office, which happened to be a subsidiary of the Blackwood Group. The irony wasn't lost on her. She might soon work in a building owned by the man who'd unknowingly given her this lifeline. She arrived 15 minutes early, as instructed by April, and was greeted by a smiling receptionist. The waiting area overlooked a sleek, modern lobby, employees bustling in and out with files and coffee cups. Celeste clutched her folder of documents, exhaling slowly to calm her nerves. The interviewer, a woman named Carmen, guided Celeste into a private office. "So, Ms. Hart," Carmen began, scanning Celeste's resume, "tell me about your experience with scheduling and multi-line phone systems." Relief flooded Celeste. This was familiar territory. She explained her past roles and how she'd handled phone calls, greeted clients, managed data entry. She mentioned her brief foray into bookkeeping. Carmen nodded along, occasionally jotting notes. "Why are you interested in our property management firm?" the interviewer asked. Celeste had practiced this answer. "I enjoy working in an environment where I can be the first point of contact, ensuring clients or tenants have a welcoming experience. I also like that property management involves both administrative organization and interpersonal connection. It's something I think I'd excel at." Carmen smiled, seeming satisfied. "We do value that personal touch with tenants and owners. Plus, you'd help coordinate the schedules of our maintenance teams and property viewings, so organization is key. I see that you've had a gap in employment. Do you mind elaborating?" Celeste steeled herself. She'd known this question would come. "I faced some personal challenges as a single mother, housing instability mainly, but I'm now in a stable transitional program and fully prepared to commit to a long-term role. In fact, I'm eager to prove myself." There it was, laid out plainly. She saw Carmen weigh her words. But thanks to April's coaching, Celeste spoke with confidence rather than desperation. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "We've had employees before who navigated tough times and came out stronger. I admire your determination." They spent another 15 minutes discussing job responsibilities and company culture. When it ended, Carmen stood, extending her hand. "We have more candidates to see, but I'll be honest. We prioritize reliability, and you've shown a strong sense of responsibility. I'll pass my recommendations up the chain, and you should hear from us soon." Celeste thanked her, shaking hands with polite enthusiasm. "I really appreciate your time." Stepping out into the hallway, she felt a surge of triumph. Even if she didn't land the job, she'd made it through an interview without her nerves derailing everything. That evening, back at the suite, she recounted the experience to Matthew as they shared dinner, just some simple pasta she'd cooked in the kitchenette. He seemed far more interested in whether the property management office had a candy bowl in the lobby. She laughed, ruffling his hair. "That's the least of my concerns, my sweet tooth monster." After she tucked him into bed, she called Tanya to update her. Tanya cheered so loudly that Celeste had to hold the phone away from her ear. "I'm so proud of you! Getting back in the game!" "Thanks, but I don't want to jinx it," Celeste said modestly, though a secret smile curved her lips. "I've got another interview in 2 days with an event planning group. Fingers crossed." They talked until Celeste's eyelids grew heavy. She ended the call, leaning against the pillows on the couch. In the quiet dimness, her thoughts drifted once more to Adrian Blackwood. She wondered if he even knew about her interview with one of his subsidiary firms, or if he was too high up to see such details. A small part of her ached with gratitude, but also with unspoken curiosity. Who was he really behind that guarded exterior? In his penthouse office, Adrian had just finished a late conference call with investors. He shut his laptop and stared into space, letting the hush of the room envelop him. He thought of Celeste on her interview day, hoping she did well. He almost felt an urge to call Linda for an update, but he stopped himself. It wasn't his place. Pressing his thumb against a faded photograph that lay hidden in his desk, one he'd kept for 3 years, even though it never showed anyone's face clearly, He exhaled. A swirl of memory threatened to overpower him. A fleeting night, a woman's gentle laughter, a promise that Easter would bring them both good luck. Then, in the cold light of dawn, he'd departed without a trace. He could hardly recall her features. Everything was blurred by time and guilt. Yet the heartache lingered, and something about Celeste's presence reignited that ache in a way he couldn't ignore. Was it mere coincidence, or a sign that the past was catching up to him? Scowling, he locked the photo away again, determined to sleep. But as he switched off the lights, he felt a prickling sense of inevitability, like a puzzle piece was sliding into place, even if he refused to see the bigger picture. For now, he would keep his distance. Fate, however, seemed determined to reveal the truth in its own relentless way. Celeste awoke Thursday morning to a gentle knock on the suite door. She rubbed her eyes, carefully extricating herself from the blankets without waking Matthew, who was still curled up like a kitten in his bed. Padding quietly across the carpet, she opened the door to find a hotel staff member, an older man with kindly eyes, holding a small package. "Good morning, Ms. Hart," he said in a subdued tone. "We received a delivery for you at the front desk." Celeste blinked in surprise. "A delivery? For me?" He nodded, handing over a slim cardboard box addressed simply with her name and the hotel's address. With a polite bow of his head, he departed. Celeste closed the door gently, heart thumping. She carried the box to the small dining table, curiosity churning in her gut. Who knew she was staying here besides the philanthropic staff and Tanya? She peeled back the tape. Inside, she found a neatly folded blazer in a soft charcoal color, with a note resting on top. The note bore neat handwriting. "Thought this might be helpful for your next interview. Rooting for you. Tanya." Celeste smiled, relief bursting in her chest. Her friend must have overheard her mention that she only had one decent outfit. A wave of gratitude swelled at Tanya's kindness. Although Tanya wasn't exactly wealthy herself, she'd clearly spent money on this to boost Celeste's confidence. Tracing a finger over the blazer's fabric, she felt tears threaten to brim. She blinked them away, determined to focus on the positivity. Someone out there believed in her. Just then, Matthew stirred, letting out a sleepy mumble before pushing himself upright. "Mommy," he said, voice still thick with drowsiness. "Who was at the door?" She turned, hugging the blazer to her chest. "Just a friendly delivery, sweetheart. Go wash up. I'll make breakfast." He nodded, yawning as he ambled to the bathroom. Celeste set the blazer aside, thinking of her second interview, scheduled for the next day with an event planning company. It had sounded more fast-paced than the property management role, but also more creative. Now she'd have a perfect outfit to wear, something that might help her stand out as professional and confident. She and Matthew ate oatmeal again, though she added fresh fruit from the hotel's welcome basket to liven it up, and mapped out the day's plan. She wanted to stop by the resource center to see April for any last-minute interview advice. Then maybe some reading time with Matthew in the lobby's small children's library corner. By mid-morning, they headed downstairs. The philanthropic program's resource center was on the third floor, set up like a communal office space with desks, pamphlets, and a few counselors working at laptops. April was there, smiling at the sight of them. "Celeste, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow," she said, pausing her typing. "How can I help today?" Celeste explained about the thoughtful gift from Tanya and how she wanted to be fully prepared for her next interview. "I really want to make a good impression. I've never worked specifically in event planning, so I'm a little nervous." April nodded enthusiastically. "No problem. Let's do a quick rundown of possible questions they might ask you. It's a small organization, so they'll likely focus on how you handle multitasking, deadlines, and occasionally unruly clients." She grinned. "Event planning can be chaotic, but if you thrive in a dynamic environment, you'll shine." Matthew busied himself at a corner table with coloring sheets while April and Celeste spoke in low tones. They hashed out sample questions. Tell me about a time you handled a crisis, or how do you manage competing priorities? And Celeste took notes. Although a few butterflies fluttered in her stomach, she felt more assured after the practice session. On the way back to the suite, they passed through the lobby, where a small commotion drew their attention. Several staff members were hurriedly rearranging furniture, and a tall banner read, "Welcome, Global Partners Conference, Blackwood Group." Celeste paused, reading the sign. A passing employee noticed her curiosity. "We have some international partners flying in for a strategic conference," she explained. "They'll be meeting in the main conference rooms over the weekend." Celeste nodded, stepping aside so the staff could roll in more chairs. She recalled hearing something about Adrian Blackwood entertaining foreign investors or partners. Just the mention of his name sent a faint wave of nervousness through her, though she didn't fully understand why. Perhaps it was the lingering memory of his guarded expression, or maybe it was the sense that any large event involving him might bring them unexpectedly face to face again. Trying to shake off the odd tension, she guided Matthew to the elevator. The rest of the day passed in a comfortable routine: lunch in the cafe, a few hours of quiet play in the children's area, and then dinner upstairs where she heated canned soup and bread. Despite her limited cooking resources, Matthew seemed perfectly content, munching away and chatting about cartoons he'd watched with the other kids. Celeste attempted to sleep early that night, wanting to be well rested for her big interview. Yet as she lay in bed, her mind whirled. She thought of how drastically her life had changed in just over a week, from sleeping in a crowded shelter to living in a safe suite with daily support. If she secured a stable job, she could save money and eventually move into her own apartment. Perhaps she could enroll Matthew in a good school next fall. Maybe life was finally offering them a fair shot. But with each hopeful thought, she felt a twinge of disquiet about Adrian. She couldn't shake the strange sense that he was more than just a faceless benefactor. Had she, at some point in the distant past, encountered him? It sounded crazy, but something about him felt almost familiar. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, and she slept. Friday dawned bright and mild. Celeste dressed carefully, sliding on the new blazer over a simple blouse. It fit surprisingly well. Tanya had guessed her size perfectly. She stood before the suite's small mirror, smoothing the lapels, feeling a boost of confidence. "This is it," she murmured to her reflection. "Time to show them what you've got." Matthew was still finishing breakfast when the phone rang. She picked up to hear April's cheerful voice. "Good morning, Celeste. Just confirming your interview at 11 a.m. with the event planning group. Are you all set?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Celeste replied, cradling the receiver against her ear. "Is there a driver arranged again?" "Yes, indeed. They'll pick you up in the lobby at 10:15. Good luck. Remember, you've got this." After hanging up, Celeste encouraged Matthew to gather toys to take to childcare. He'd be spending a few hours there again. He didn't complain, bouncing around excitedly because he'd made a new friend named Lucas the day before. Celeste knelt to zip up his little backpack. "Behave, okay? And no fighting over crayons." He nodded solemnly, then broke into a grin. "I like crayons." She ruffled his hair, heart pounding from more than just interview jitters. She was also filled with gratitude that her son was safe, happy, and looking forward to each day. A week ago, all of this seemed impossible. At 10 sharp, they descended to the lobby. She kissed Matthew goodbye at the childcare center, then moved to the main doors to await the driver. Hotel staff buzzed about, prepping for the upcoming conference. She caught snippets of conversation. "Mr. Blackwood wants the welcome dinner finalized. The foreign delegates arrive tonight," and so on. The swirl of official business made her self-conscious. A mere occupant in the philanthropic suite, but she reminded herself she had a mission of her own: get the job and secure her future. When the driver arrived, she settled in the back seat of a modest black sedan. The ride through the city gave her time to mentally rehearse her answers once more. She stared out the window at the passing skyscrapers, her mind floating to Adrian again. The feeling that their paths might cross soon nagged at her, though she had no concrete reason to believe so. She shook her head, pushing that distraction aside. Focus on the interview. The event planning office was housed in a charming renovated loft downtown, brick walls and tall windows giving it a creative flair. She thanked the driver, stepping onto a cobblestone sidewalk with her folder clutched tight. Heart drumming, she entered the lobby. A cheerful sign on the door read, "Blissful Horizons Events." Inside, a cluster of desks and trendy furniture formed an open workspace. A young man with stylish glasses introduced himself as Marcus, the office manager. "You must be Ms. Hart," he said warmly. "We're excited to have you here. Let me show you around before your interview." He led her through a brief tour. The space buzzed with people chatting about upcoming galas, charity functions, and corporate lunches. Posters of past events lined the walls, happy couples at weddings, guests mingling at business mixers, elaborate floral arrangements. Celeste felt a rush of excitement. This was a realm where creativity, deadlines, and people skills merged, exactly the kind of challenge that sparked her interest. Marcus guided her to a small conference room where she'd be interviewing with the company's director, Felicia Reed. Felicia stood behind a sleek wooden table, hair pinned up in a loose bun, wearing a bold, patterned dress. Her handshake was firm, yet friendly. "Celeste, thanks for coming," Felicia said, settling into a chair. "Let's dive right in. Tell me why you think you'd be a great fit for event planning. It can be chaotic, you know." Celeste took a breath, reminding herself to exude confidence. "I've always enjoyed coordinating details and ensuring people feel welcome. In my previous roles, I excelled at juggling phone calls, scheduling, and client inquiries. I like the challenge of keeping multiple tasks moving smoothly." Felicia nodded. "We handle everything from high-end weddings to large-scale corporate gatherings. The job can mean late nights, last-minute changes, and a lot of improvisation." She raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her expression. "Does that scare you?" A flicker of anxiety rose, but Celeste had prepared. "Not at all. I'm adaptable, and I work well under pressure. I also like that every event is different. There's always something new to learn." They continued discussing responsibilities. Booking venues, liaising with caterers, drafting budget sheets. Felicia seemed pleased with Celeste's answers about prioritizing tasks and communicating clearly with stressed-out clients. Yet Celeste could sense Felicia was sharp, analyzing every nuance to see if Celeste truly had the resilience needed. After a series of scenario-based questions, "How would you handle a caterer backing out last minute?" Felicia closed her notepad, tapping it thoughtfully. "We want someone who can grow with the company. The pay isn't glamorous at first, but we have a supportive team and room for advancement." She took a moment to study Celeste's face. "Why should we pick you over more experienced event planners?" Celeste's pulse quickened. This was the big question. "Because I'm fiercely committed to doing a job well. I may not have years in event planning, but I learn fast. I love dealing with people, and I'm dedicated to building a stable future. I'll bring that drive to every project." Silence settled for a beat as Felicia regarded her, perhaps weighing sincerity against skill. Finally, Felicia gave a slow nod. "I appreciate honesty. Let me confer with my associates and we'll get back to you soon. One note, we have a major corporate gala for the Blackwood Group next month, so if you come on board, you'd be thrown into the deep end, helping plan some of their sessions, maybe even coordinating arrivals." The mention of Blackwood Group snagged Celeste's focus. She inhaled, maintaining composure. "I'm definitely up for that challenge," she managed, voice steady. With a faint smile, Felicia stood. "Great. We'll let you know by early next week. Thank you for your time." Celeste left the building feeling exhilarated and a touch of apprehension. The job sounded thrilling and also nerve-wracking. She couldn't help but wonder if crossing into Blackwood Group territory again meant she'd inevitably encounter Adrian or his team. The possibility both intrigued and unsettled her. Back at the hotel, she found Matthew in the childcare room building an impressive tower of blocks. He rushed over when he saw her. "How'd it go, Mommy?" She smiled, hugging him tight. "I think it went well. We'll know soon." That evening, after a quiet dinner, she gazed out the suite's window at the distant skyscrapers. She thought about her 2 interviews, both promising leads, and the mention of the Blackwood Group's upcoming gala. Fate seemed to keep pointing her toward the same name, the same man. And though she tried to reassure herself it was just professional overlap, her intuition whispered otherwise. As city lights flickered and Matthew fell asleep, Celeste whispered a silent prayer for a fresh start. Yet she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of mystery tied to Adrian Blackwood. It felt as though every step she took, every opportunity that arose, circled back to him. And she couldn't help but wonder if, when all was revealed, it would catapult her life forward, or throw everything into chaos once more. A soft drizzle tapped at the suite's window the following Saturday morning, painting the city in streaks of gray. Celeste woke early, a pit of nervous excitement in her stomach. She still hadn't heard back from either interview, and the anticipation gnawed at her. Typically, employers might take a week or more to decide, but her situation felt more urgent. She needed real income soon. She rose carefully from the couch, where she'd slept again, to give Matthew the full comfort of the bed. The suite had 2 beds, but he always wanted her nearby, so she often ended up on the couch. Stretching her arms above her head, she glanced over at him, bundled up under the blankets, snoring softly. A wave of affection wrapped around her heart. Whatever happened with those interviews, she reminded herself, Matthew was safe. That was what truly mattered. With the morning free, she decided to use the hotel's laundry facilities, hoping to wash their limited wardrobe. She wrote a small note for Matthew, just in case he woke before she returned, and quietly slipped out into the hallway, carrying a mesh bag of clothes. The corridor was serene, bathed in the hush of early hours. She hadn't gone far when she noticed an unusual bustle in the lobby below. Through the glass balustrade, she spotted several well-dressed individuals milling about, speaking in low tones. Employees wearing Blackwood Group badges hurried around, wheeling in carts of documents, suitcases, and polished briefcases. She recalled the banner announcing an international partners conference. Her heart jolted at the reminder that Adrian Blackwood would likely be in the building, hosting dignitaries, orchestrating deals. Just thinking of him ignited a strange mixture of curiosity and anxiety in her chest. In the laundry room on the basement level, Celeste found relief in the simple, repetitive task of sorting whites and colors. She loaded the washers, poured in detergent, and started the cycles. The steady hum of the machines calmed her restless mind. While she waited, she studied her phone for missed calls. Nothing so far. Biting her lip, she resisted the urge to text Tanya again. Patience, she told herself. A watched pot never boils, and a watched phone never rings. After switching loads to the dryers and folding the fresh clothes, she headed back upstairs. The lobby was livelier now. Delegates from various countries chatting in hushed, formal voices. The air smelled of coffee and polished leather. A large digital sign displayed Blackwood Global Strategy Summit, Conference Rooms AE. She clutched her laundry bag tightly, hoping to slip through unnoticed. But a brief moment of eye contact with one of the staff members made her self-conscious, aware she was just a participant in the philanthropic program. Yet no one gave her a second glance. Everyone seemed too busy with their own tasks. Suddenly, she paused near the lobby cafe. Adrian Blackwood himself stood there, conferring with an older man in a sharp navy suit. Celeste's breath hitched. He was within a few yards, his expression controlled yet intense as he listened to the man's hushed words. Even amid the bustling crowd, he carried an aura of composure that set him apart. Her chest tightened. For a second she considered just walking by, but then Adrian's gaze shifted, and their eyes met. Celeste froze, embarrassment flushing her cheeks as if she'd been caught eavesdropping on something private. Surprisingly, Adrian's stern expression softened briefly. He gave her a small nod, acknowledging her presence. She managed a polite half-smile in return, heart pounding. Did she dare approach him to say hello? It wasn't exactly appropriate to mingle when he was clearly in a high-level discussion. Before she could decide, one of the foreign delegates stepped forward, shaking Adrian's hand and drawing his attention away. The moment was over, leaving Celeste feeling oddly bereft. She hurried on toward the elevators, clutching her laundry bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she returned to the suite, Matthew was awake, sprawled on the bed and playing with building blocks he'd borrowed from the childcare room. She set down the laundry. "Good morning, sweetie," she greeted, forcing brightness into her voice. He grinned up at her. "You were gone? I saw your note." "Just doing laundry," she explained, taking a seat on the edge of the bed. "Ready for breakfast?" He nodded enthusiastically, tumbling off the bed. As he rummaged for a fresh shirt from the folded pile, Celeste rubbed her arms, trying to dispel the lingering tension. That single glance from Adrian had felt more intense than a simple, polite acknowledgement. Had she imagined the flicker of recognition in his eyes? Or was there something deeper there? She couldn't dwell on it. Matthew was already chattering about pancakes. Laughing, she guided him out the door, deciding she'd focus on the day-to-day tasks rather than the CEO's inscrutable expressions. Meanwhile, Adrian escorted the foreign delegates down the corridor leading to the conference rooms. His posture was impeccable, his voice collected as he explained the day's schedule. Business presentations in the morning, lunch with potential partners in the hotel restaurant, and then breakout strategy sessions in the afternoon. But despite the meticulous itinerary he'd helped craft, his mind kept drifting to the quick glimpse of Celeste in the lobby. It unsettled him how easily she could slip into his thoughts. The memory of her standing there with a laundry bag, her cheeks tinting pink at their accidental eye contact. Why did it tug at him? While the delegate beside him droned on about market expansion, Adrian fought off a surge of old memories. It wasn't the first time he felt an inexplicable familiarity when he looked at Celeste. He found himself replaying fragments of that night 3 years ago, the one he'd buried under layers of guilt. Was it possible she reminded him of that stranger so strongly because they shared some resemblance, or was fate weaving a more direct connection he couldn't yet comprehend? He shook it off, guiding the group into Conference Room B. The day's tasks demanded his attention. He led discussions, reviewed financial projections, and negotiated details with the delegates, never letting his professional demeanor slip. By lunchtime, his associates recognized his efficiency but also noted a tautness in his manner. Linda, perceptive as ever, gently approached him between sessions. "Everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, handing him a file for the afternoon's breakout. "You seem tense." "I'm fine," he murmured, though he glanced away. He disliked personal inquiries, yet Linda was more than just an assistant. She was nearly a trusted confidant. With a small sigh, he added, "I just have a lot on my mind." Linda nodded, understanding he wouldn't say more here. She made a mental note to check on him later. She suspected that the presence of international partners, and perhaps someone else in the building, was stirring old ghosts. Around 2 p.m., Celeste took Matthew out for a short walk near the hotel. The rain had tapered off, leaving the sidewalks damp and shining under a pale sun. She hoped some fresh air would burn off her restlessness. They strolled a few blocks, passing small shops and cafes. She let Matthew pick a pastry from a bakery window, watching him nibble it with delight. The normalcy of it felt good. She thought of how easily she'd once popped into bakeries when life was stable, never imagining she'd lose that privilege so abruptly. When they returned, the hotel was bustling with lunchtime traffic. Executives grabbing coffee, delegates murmuring in different languages. Matthew tugged her toward the childcare area, excited to see if his friend Lucas was around. Celeste was tempted to let him play for a while, but she wanted him to rest, so she told him they'd head back up to the suite first. He pouted in mild protest, but followed her to the elevator. They hadn't even reached the doors when Celeste heard someone call her name. She turned to see Linda approaching, carefully weaving through the crowd. "Celeste, just the person I was hoping to run into," Linda said, her usual composed manner tinged with urgency. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" Celeste's stomach fluttered. "Sure," she replied, moving aside to a quiet corner near a potted palm tree. Matthew yawned, leaning against her leg. Linda offered him a gentle smile before turning to Celeste. "I got word from the property management firm you interviewed with. They want you to come in for a second interview on Monday." She paused, letting the information sink in. Celeste inhaled sharply, excitement bubbling up. "That's wonderful news." Linda nodded. "It is, but there's more. They asked if you could potentially start as early as next Friday if all goes well. They're short-staffed and need someone quickly." That's perfect." Celeste's voice trembled with relief. "A steady job so soon? It was like a dream." But a sliver of doubt flickered. "I'm still waiting to hear back from the event planning company, though." Linda pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Yes, April mentioned that. We haven't heard anything official from them yet. If you get offered both positions, you'll have a choice." Celeste felt almost dizzy with gratitude and nerves. "I never thought I'd be in a position to choose. This is incredible." "And well-deserved," Linda said softly. "You've worked hard to get here. Just keep in mind the timelines. If you accept the property management role, they'll expect you to commit to their schedule." Celeste nodded. "I understand." Matthew tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm tired," he mumbled, leaning into her. She hoisted him onto her hip. "We'll talk more later, Linda. Thank you so much for letting me know." Linda promised to update her if the event planning firm responded. As they parted ways, Celeste's mind spun. A second interview at the property management firm essentially meant they were very interested in hiring her. Could she really have a full-time job in just over a week? Back in the suite, she tucked a sleepy Matthew in for a nap, then sat on the couch, hugging a throw pillow to her chest. Her thoughts drifted through a swirl of possibilities. The property management job might be more stable and structured, perfect for someone juggling single motherhood. But the event planning role seemed more exciting, albeit with longer hours and unpredictability. She liked the idea of doing something creative, but also craved the security of a steady schedule for Matthew's sake. Her phone remained silent regarding any news from Felicia's event firm. Maybe they were still interviewing other candidates, or maybe they'd chosen someone else. She sighed, glancing at the damp cityscape outside. One thing was certain: she was moving forward. At the same time, Adrian found himself in a mid-afternoon slump after hours of meetings. Some delegates had returned to their rooms to rest while others continued breakout sessions. He stepped out of the conference area to clear his mind. When he passed Linda in the corridor, she hesitated, then quietly mentioned, "I updated Ms. Hart about her second interview. She seemed very happy." Though Adrian kept his face neutral, inside he felt a flicker of relief. He'd known Linda was handling Celeste's job placement, but hearing she was progressing gave him a surprising sense of calm. "That's good to hear," he said. Linda ventured a step further. "It's quite remarkable how quickly she's gotten these opportunities. She's clearly determined." "Yes." A pause, something unspoken hovering between them. Adrian cleared his throat, returning to formality. "The philanthropic program is functioning as intended. Let's continue to ensure she has the support she needs." Linda acknowledged with a nod, reading the subtext, that Adrian cared but didn't want to show too much. "Of course, sir." He left, moving through the lobby, heading towards the elevator that would take him to his private office. Yet he couldn't shake the thought that Celeste's life was changing rapidly. and that somehow their paths were entwined. With each new step she took, he felt a tug on his heart, like a distant echo of something he once lost. Staring at his reflection in the polished elevator doors, Adrian wondered if the day would come when he'd have to confront his own secrets, face to face with the woman fate had brought under his care. And if that day arrived, would he have the courage to accept the consequences of a past he'd tried so hard to bury? As evening settled, Celeste cooked a simple dinner of rice and vegetables for herself and Matthew. The clouds finally broke, letting the last rays of sunset cast a glow through the suite's windows. Their small table was cluttered with coloring pages, job notes, and a few leftover Easter candies. It felt domestic and warm, something Celeste had yearned for when they were on the streets. After dinner, Matthew asked if they could read a story. She smiled, pulling him onto the couch. He chose a short picture book about a curious bunny, and she read aloud, her voice soft and soothing. By the final page, his eyelids drooped. She carried him to bed, tucking the blankets around him. "Good night, my brave boy," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Returning to the couch, she stared at her phone one last time, hoping for a voicemail from Felicia's firm. Nothing. With a mixture of excitement and mild disappointment, she set it aside. The prospect of the second interview at the property management office buoyed her spirits, but a small part of her still wondered if the event planning job might appear at the last minute. Curling up under a light blanket, she closed her eyes. Thoughts of the future and flickers of Adrian's shadowed expression swirled in her mind. She tried to push them away. Tomorrow was another day, a day that might bring new choices, new revelations. Little did she know the threads of her fate and Adrian's were tightening, drawing them closer to a moment that would reveal everything. Sunday dawned clear, a light breeze carrying the scent of newly washed pavement through the city. Up in the suite, Celeste woke to a sunbeam stretching across the carpet, illuminating the clutter of coloring books and neatly folded clothes she and Matthew had organized the night before. There was a serene quiet to the morning, no urgent errands, no interview looming. Yet her mind churned with anticipation, waiting for any call that might confirm her next steps. She dressed in casual jeans and a soft sweater, then urged Matthew into his everyday clothes before they ventured downstairs for breakfast. The hotel's lobby cafe offered a small buffet on weekends, a luxury Celeste still hadn't grown used to. She guided Matthew through the line, helping him pick out fresh fruit and a small muffin. He pointed eagerly at the pancake station, but she gently insisted on something healthier first. As they settled at a corner table, Celeste noticed the crowd seemed thinner than usual. Perhaps most of the business travelers were still sleeping off the week's conference demands. She let out a quiet sigh of relief, grateful for a more relaxed atmosphere. Matthew swung his legs beneath the chair, humming contentedly as he munched on his muffin. Celeste sipped her coffee, scanning her phone for updates. Still no calls. After the swirl of activity during the week, the stillness felt almost disconcerting. She caught herself tapping her foot nervously. "You okay, Mommy?" Matthew asked, his childlike intuition unerring. She offered a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just waiting to hear about the jobs." "Which job do you want?" he asked through a mouthful of crumbs. "The one with the houses or the one with the parties?" She half laughed. "Well, they're both good in different ways. I just want whichever helps us the most and makes me happy." Matthew nodded sagely, though his attention soon wandered to the cafe's aquarium near the wall. A single bright orange fish caught his eye, and he hopped off the chair to go watch it, leaving his half-eaten muffin behind. Celeste gazed after him, love filling her chest. Kids had such a pure way of living in the moment, no worries beyond the next interesting thing. She envied that simplicity sometimes. Her phone buzzed, making her heart lurch. She fumbled to pick it up, praying it was an interview callback. The caller ID showed an unknown number. She took a breath, bracing herself, and pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello? Ms. Hart, this is Felicia Reed from Blissful Horizons Events. came a bright, professional voice. Celeste's pulse quickened. Yes. Hello, Ms. Reed. Good morning. Good morning. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I wanted to follow up on your interview Friday. She squeezed the edge of the table, excitement and nerves colliding. Sure. I've been eager to hear back. Well, Felicia said, a smile evident in her tone, I'm pleased to say that our team enjoyed meeting you. We believe you'd be a solid addition to the administrative side of our event planning, so if you're still interested, we'd like to offer you the position. Celeste nearly dropped the phone. Really? That's amazing. Thank you so much. Felicia chuckled. You made a great impression. We'd need you to start fairly soon. There's a lot happening, especially with a big corporate gala next month. But we can discuss details. How about you drop by our office tomorrow to finalize paperwork? Her mind reeled. The property management firm wanted a second interview Monday, and now Felicia wanted to finalize a job tomorrow as well. She forced herself to remain calm. Yes, I can do that. Tomorrow works. I really appreciate this opportunity. Wonderful. I'll email you the details this afternoon, Felicia said. Enjoy your Sunday, Ms. Hart. We'll see you soon. They exchanged goodbyes, and Celeste ended the call exhaling sharply. She could hardly believe it. She'd just landed a job offer in the field that excited her most. A bubble of joy rose in her chest. She locked her phone, pressed it to her heart, and whispered, "Oh my God, we did it." Matthew returned, eyes round with curiosity. "Mommy, what happened? You look like you're gonna burst." She laughed, scooping him into a tight hug. "I got the job, honey. The event planning one. They want me to start soon." He giggled, hugging her back. "So we can have more money? And maybe get a house?" Her throat tightened with emotion. "Yes, love, we're on our way." But as soon as that rush of euphoria swelled, it clashed with the knowledge that the property management firm also wanted to see her tomorrow. She'd been excited about that job too, and they were already scheduling a second interview. Could she afford to turn them down when she hadn't even secured the event planning contract's details, like salary, hours, and benefits? She stood from the table, ushering Matthew back to his muffin. "Finish up, sweetie," she said absently, mind whirling. She had to handle this carefully. Felicia's company might offer a more exciting role, but the property management firm might be more stable, and she'd heard mention that it had good benefits, which was crucial for a single mother. Once Matthew finished, they returned to the suite. She paced the living area, rereading old notes. The property management second interview was at 10 a.m. Monday, while Felicia wanted her to come in any time tomorrow to sign paperwork. If she finalized with Felicia first, would that burn a bridge with the property management folks? She dialed April's number, hoping for guidance. April picked up almost immediately, her voice laced with curiosity. "Celeste, everything all right?" I just got an offer from the event planning firm," Celeste blurted, excitement mingled with confusion. "But the property management people also want me to come back tomorrow for a second interview. I'm not sure which path is best." April sounded delighted at first. "That's fantastic, Celeste. Congrats on the offer. Let's think this through calmly." They spent the next few minutes discussing pros and cons. The event planning role might pay a bit less initially, but offered potential for raises if she proved herself. It could also mean irregular hours, nights, weekends, last-minute changes. The property management job likely had more regular hours, possibly better benefits, but might be less fulfilling if she craved variety. And they might not guarantee an offer, April warned. "It's just a second interview, right? If you turn down Felicia's job now, you could end up with nothing if the other doesn't come through." Celeste swallowed. "That's true. But I also don't want to close the door too soon. The property management role felt like a sure thing if they're rushing me in for a second interview." April hummed thoughtfully. "Maybe you can stall Felicia for a day? Ask to meet Tuesday instead of Monday, just so you can attend the second interview. Then you'll have all the facts before you make a final decision." "That's a good idea," Celeste murmured. I just hope Felicia doesn't get offended if I delay paperwork. She might be fine with it, or she might push you to sign, but you have the right to weigh your options." After a bit more discussion, Celeste thanked April, promising to keep her updated. She ended the call, feeling more settled. She decided to email Felicia, politely asking if they could finalize paperwork on Tuesday, citing a prior appointment Monday that couldn't be rescheduled. It was half true. She just didn't mention it was another job interview. Matthew, oblivious to the adult dilemma, was busy drawing stick-figure versions of them in a big house with a yard. She ruffled his hair, telling him everything would work out. Yet the knot in her stomach persisted. She didn't want to seem ungrateful to Felicia, but it was wise to compare both options. She typed out a concise yet polite email, hitting send with a trembling finger. Now she'd wait again, for Felicia's response, for the property management interview to hopefully turn into an offer. The uncertainty weighed on her, but at least it was a positive uncertainty. That evening, the hotel corridors filled once more with global delegates returning from the day's tours and networking events. Celeste avoided the bustling lobby, opting to watch an animated movie upstairs with Matthew, indulging in some mother-son bonding. She needed the emotional balm of his laughter to stave off her job-related anxiety. Around 8 p.m., her phone chimed with an incoming email. Her heart pounded as she opened it, expecting Felicia's reply. Indeed, it was from Felicia. "Hi Celeste, I understand life can be hectic. Tuesday for paperwork is acceptable. Let's aim for 10 a.m. In the meantime, I'll send you an overview of salary and benefits so you can review. Looking forward to having you on board." Celeste breathed a sigh of relief, shoulders drooping as she sank onto the bed. Thank you," she whispered aloud to no one in particular. She was grateful Felicia was flexible. The door to the property management job remained open for tomorrow's second interview, and she wouldn't lose the event planning offer in the process. Matthew, peeking up from the movie, asked, "You okay, Mommy?" She gathered him into a hug. "Yes, baby, I'm more than okay." Outside, the city lights sparkled in the mild spring night, reflecting off glass towers and the distant river. Tomorrow, Celeste would face the next crucial step at the property management firm. If that interview went well and they offered a competitive package, she'd have a real choice for the first time in her life. Somewhere across town, Adrian Blackwood left a formal dinner with international partners, exhaustion tugging at his frame. He'd smiled through countless toasts, made impeccable small talk, but none of it eased the unsettled feeling in his chest. The mention of an upcoming corporate gala, one that apparently needed event planning, kept tickling his mind. He knew the philanthropic office had recommended Celeste for an events role. Was it possible she'd be involved in that gala if hired? He clamped down on the thought, reminding himself he had no reason to meddle. Yet a small part of him yearned to know whether she was faring well, whether she'd chosen a job that suited her. As he rode the elevator to his penthouse suite, this time located on a higher floor in the same hotel, reserved for top executives, he gazed at his reflection in the mirrored walls. The look in his own eyes unsettled him, as though he were on the brink of acknowledging a secret he'd long refused to face. He keyed into his penthouse, ignoring the plush surroundings, and dropped onto a leather armchair. One hand drifted to the desk drawer where he kept that photograph from 3 years ago. He didn't pull it out, just rested his palm on the drawer's handle. The memory was always there, simmering. "Let it go," he whispered to himself. "It's in the past." Yet fate seemed intent on weaving the past into his present. Tomorrow, Celeste would continue her journey toward rebuilding her life. Adrian's conference would continue with negotiations. Their worlds still felt separate, but each day that line blurred further. The truth, whatever it might be, crept closer, and soon neither of them would be able to deny it. For now, Celeste drifted to sleep, heart full of guarded hope, and Adrian, in his silent penthouse, stared at the city lights until he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer. Both were on the threshold of a revelation that would upend everything they thought they knew about Easter nights, old regrets, and the fragile promise of second chances. The Monday morning sun rose bright and clear, reflecting off the hotel's glass facade like a promise of new beginnings. Celeste woke earlier than usual, her nerves thrumming. Today was the day of her second interview at the property management firm, an important step that could define her future. She had tossed and turned all night, her mind torn between her two promising job options. Matthew still dozed, so she quietly slipped into the bathroom to get ready. She'd pressed her skirt and blouse again, pairing them with the blazer Tanya had sent. Standing before the mirror, she smoothed the lapel, trying to quell the butterflies in her stomach. "You can do this," she told herself, inhaling deeply. "You've come this far." When she emerged, Matthew was awake, blinking sleepily in the gentle daylight. "Mommy," he said, yawning, "you look fancy again." She managed a small smile. "I have another interview today, sweetie, but remember, I might still take the event planning job. I just want to see what this one has to offer." He seemed content with that, his little mind not quite grasping the intricacies of career decisions. "Can I go to the daycare room again?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Sure. They'll take care of you while I'm gone. After that, maybe we can do something fun." Matthew brightened, hopping off the bed to gather his favorite toy car. Celeste checked the time. It was 8:30. Her interview was at 10, and the driver was scheduled to pick her up at 9:15. She had just enough time to feed Matthew a quick breakfast in the cafe. Downstairs, the lobby hummed with quieter activity than before. Most of the international delegates had left or were in closed-door meetings. Celeste guided Matthew to the cafe, snagging a bagel and fruit for him, plus coffee for herself. She forced down a few bites of toast, though her stomach churned with anticipation. By the time she'd dropped Matthew off at childcare and stepped outside to meet the driver, her heart was pounding. She climbed into the sedan, thanking the same courteous man who'd driven her before. As the city streets slid by, she mentally rehearsed how she'd handle the second interview. Be honest, be confident, ask about benefits and hours. She kept reminding herself that if it didn't pan out, she still had Felicia's offer. When they arrived at the property management office, a tall, modern building with reflective windows, she walked in with determined steps. The receptionist recognized her from the first interview. "Good morning, Ms. Hart. Carmen will see you in the main conference room." A new stir of excitement rippled through Celeste. She pressed the elevator button and rode up to the 6th floor. The corridor was sleek, lined with framed photographs of apartment complexes and commercial spaces the firm managed. It gave a sense of stability, of a well-established company. In the conference room, Carmen greeted her with a warm smile. To Celeste's surprise, there were two other people present: a middle-aged man in a navy suit and a woman in a sharp pencil skirt, both wearing polite professional expressions. Carmen introduced them as part of the management team. "Ms. Hart," Carmen began, "thank you for coming back on short notice. We wanted you to meet Mr. Reyes, our regional director, and Ms. Elliott from HR." They shook hands all around, and Celeste settled into a chair at a long wooden table. The walls bore motivational quotes about teamwork and excellence. A pitcher of water stood nearby, but her throat felt too tight to drink. Mr. Reyes cleared his throat. "We're expanding rapidly and need someone who can handle the front desk coordinator role with grace and efficiency. Carmen speaks highly of you. We'd like to know if you see yourself as a long-term fit." Celeste relaxed a fraction. "I do. I'm looking for a stable position. I'm dedicated to providing excellent service, and I thrive on organization." The questions flowed, some echoing the first interview, her background, her approach to multitasking. But others dug deeper into her future goals, how she handled conflict, or whether she'd be open to more responsibilities over time. Celeste answered with as much honesty and confidence as she could muster. After nearly half an hour, Ms. Elliott handed Celeste a small packet of papers. "This outlines our standard benefits: health insurance, paid time off, Even some tuition assistance if you're interested in classes down the road," Ms. Elliott explained. "We take pride in supporting our employees' growth. If you join us, we'd also provide a small relocation bonus for housing if needed." A flush of gratitude warmed Celeste's cheeks. They were clearly trying to entice her. It felt surreal to be courted by an employer after weeks of uncertainty and shelter living. Carmen and Mr. Reyes exchanged a glance. Then Mr. Reyes folded his hands on the table. "Frankly, Ms. Hart, we'd like you to start as soon as possible. Our current front desk coordinator is transitioning to another department on Friday. We'd need you by Monday of next week. Would that be feasible?" Celeste inhaled sharply. Monday next week. That was a firm timeline. Felicia's event planning job also wanted her to start soon. She hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "It's definitely possible. I have one other opportunity I'm considering, but I've been very impressed with your company and what this position offers." A flicker of surprise crossed Carmen's features, but she smiled. "We understand. Please take these documents and review them. We're prepared to offer you this job, Ms. Hart." She slid a typed letter across the table. "If you can confirm by tomorrow, we'd be grateful." Celeste stared at the letter. An official job offer with a clear salary, which, while not extravagant, was enough for her to stabilize her life. The benefits looked decent, too. Her pulse throbbed with excitement and conflict. "Thank you," she managed, voice thick. "I'll give you my answer very soon." They shook hands, and Celeste left the conference room in a daze. She practically floated out of the building, the letter clutched in her hand. Outside, the sun glinted on glass towers and people hurried along the sidewalks. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to do both. After everything, sleeping in a shelter, the heartbreak of near despair, she now had 2 genuine job offers in front of her. The driver picked her up a few minutes later and she slid into the back seat, letting out a trembling breath. She texted April a quick update. "Property MGMT gave me an official offer. Need to decide by tomorrow. Feels unreal." April's reply buzzed in seconds. "Incredible. Let's chat soon." By the time Celeste returned to the hotel, the tension in her shoulders had settled into cautious optimism. She found Matthew in the childcare room, happily stacking blocks. He squealed in delight when she scooped him up. "Mommy's got great news," she whispered in his ear. "They offered me the job." "Again?" he exclaimed, wide-eyed. "Which job do you pick?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, ruffling his hair, "but we'll figure it out." They rode the elevator up, stepping out into a hallway that was busier than usual. Just ahead, Celeste saw Linda exit a side office. She waved, catching Celeste's eye, and hurried over. "Celeste! So, did the interview go well?" Linda asked, scanning her face. Celeste nodded, handing over the official letter. "They want me to start Monday. I'm thrilled, but Felicia's event planning job also wants me. Both pay similarly, with slight differences in schedules and benefits." Linda's eyes flicked over the letter. "Congratulations, this is wonderful. April told me you might have a real choice on your hands." Celeste let out a half laugh. "I never thought I'd be in demand. I need to decide soon." Linda considered her gently. "If you need any help comparing the offers, we're here. Mr. Blackwood always intended for this program to empower individuals to choose what's best for their family." The mention of Adrian Blackwood made Celeste's heart jump. She realized he was at the root of all these resources and connections. Suddenly, an urge welled up in her, to thank him personally, to express how life-changing this had been, yet she also recalled his distant, closed-off manner. Would he even welcome such an approach? Linda seemed to sense her thoughts. "He's in the building today, busy with the final conference wrap-up, but—" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "If you'd like to speak with him, I can check if he has a spare moment this afternoon. Sometimes a direct thank you can bring closure." Celeste bit her lip. "I don't want to intrude," she murmured. But the longing to express her gratitude and perhaps unravel the puzzle of why she felt so drawn to him sparked in her chest. "Maybe Yes, if he's free. Linda nodded. No promises, but I'll ask. For now, go enjoy your afternoon with Matthew. You've earned some calm. They parted ways and Celeste returned to the suite, her thoughts spinning. She busied herself making a light lunch, though her mind kept drifting to that possible meeting with Adrian. She pictured his cool, gray-blue eyes, the faint lines of care around them. Something in her heart whispered that if they talked one-on-one, she might discover a connection deeper than philanthropic generosity. Time slipped by. Mid-afternoon, her phone chirped with a text from Linda. Mr. Blackwood can see you at 4 p.m. in his office on the top floor. He has a short window free. Celeste's breath caught. Could she do this? Summon the courage to speak directly, to offer heartfelt thanks and maybe glean why she felt like they'd met before? She told Matthew she'd drop him in the childcare room for a short while, explaining she had one more grown-up conversation to handle. He accepted with an eager nod, always happy to play with the other kids. At 3:55, Celeste stood outside the executive elevator that led to Adrian Blackwood's top-floor office. Her palms were damp, her heart pounding. She wore the same outfit as in her interview, which gave her at least a semblance of poise. The elevator dinged open on a hushed corridor lined with modern art. At the far end, Linda waited by a glass door bearing a discreet nameplate. Adrian Blackwood, CEO. Linda gave her an encouraging smile. He's expecting you. Don't be nervous. Just be yourself. Celeste swallowed hard and nodded. Thank you, Linda. Stepping into the office, she found a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Adrian stood behind a sleek wooden desk, an imposing figure in a tailored suit. Papers were neatly stacked beside him, and a laptop sat open. He looked up as she entered, the guarded expression in his eyes flickering. "Ms. Hart," he greeted, gesturing for her to sit in one of the chairs before the desk. "Please, come in." She moved forward, every nerve tense. Sitting carefully, she placed her folded hands in her lap. He eased into his own chair, a certain tension about him as well. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began quietly. "I won't take much of your time. She exhaled, trying to steady her voice. "I wanted to personally thank you. Your philanthropic program changed everything for me and my son. We went from having nothing, literally sleeping at a shelter, to having 2 job offers and a stable place to stay. I can't tell you how grateful I am." He listened intently, his face unreadable at first. Then a subtle warmth crept into his gaze. "I'm glad the program has served its purpose," he said, voice measured. "You deserve the credit. You embraced every opportunity." She nodded, swallowing. "Maybe so, but without your help, I don't know where we'd be." He lowered his gaze to the papers on his desk. "You're welcome, Ms. Hart. Truly. And how is your son? Matthew, right?" A tender smile curved her lips at the mention of Matthew's name. "He's doing well, thriving, really. It's amazing how quickly kids adapt when they feel secure." Adrian's eyes flicked back up, and in them she saw an emotion she couldn't quite decipher, something like longing or regret. He cleared his throat, shifting slightly. "That's good." Silence stretched between them. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glowed under a late-afternoon sun. Celeste's heart hammered as she wrestled with the urge to say something more personal. She recalled that strange sense of familiarity, the feeling that they'd crossed paths long ago. Could she ask him? Would that sound crazy? His hand unconsciously brushed a corner of his desk drawer. The slight gesture drew her attention. For a second, a memory flickered in her mind. An old motel room, the hush of night, the faint glow of a lamp, a man's quiet laughter. She tried so hard to forget that final glimpse of the father of her child, but bits of that night remained locked in her heart. She parted her lips to ask a question, but the words caught in her throat. She wasn't even certain. The father of her son had left so abruptly that all she'd clung to was a single note. and the knowledge that it happened 3 Easters ago. She'd only glimpsed him in partial light, the memory blurred by heartbreak. Adrian seemed to sense her turmoil. His posture stiffened. Something about her expression made him look wary. After a moment, he drew a sharp breath. "Is there anything else on your mind, Ms. Hart?" Her pulse raced, the question perched on the tip of her tongue. Could you be the man from that Easter night? She felt almost dizzy with the possibility, but it was too wild, too improbable. She tamped it down, deciding she must be imagining things. She mustered a faint smile. "No, I just wanted to say thank you." He nodded curtly, tension rippling in his jaw. "I'm pleased for you, and I wish you the best with whichever job you choose." A wave of disappointment lanced through her. She'd secretly hoped for some sign or confession, but maybe she was chasing phantoms. "Thank you," she repeated softly, rising from the chair. "I'll let you get back to work." She turned to leave, feeling his gaze on her. Her heart twisted. As she reached the door, his voice came quietly. "Ms. Hart, if you need anything else, the program remains at your disposal." She glanced over her shoulder, meeting his eyes one last time. "I appreciate that," she said gently. Then she walked out, the glass door closing with a subtle click behind her. In the corridor, Linda gave her a curious look, but Celeste just smiled shakily. She hurried to the elevator, breath unsteady. That fleeting tension, the hint of unspoken recognition, it still lurked between them, unresolved. But with no proof, no actual memory to confirm, it might remain a mystery. Back in her suite, Matthew greeted her with questions about cartoons. She hugged him tight, burying her nose in his hair to find comfort in his innocence. Maybe it was enough to know they had a future, regardless of the past. As for Adrian, he stood motionless in his office for a long minute after she left, staring at the closed door. Then, slowly, he reached into that drawer, pulling out a worn photograph. Though it only showed half a woman's face and the dim interior of a roadside inn, he ran his thumb over the faded edges. His heart hammered with a realization he refused to voice, that the puzzle pieces might fit after all. Someday soon, the truth would demand to be known. But for now, mother and son prepared for a new life, and a lonely CEO stared at an old snapshot, both clinging to hope and haunted by a secret Easter night that bound them more tightly than either could guess. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.